Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineers Sports. And we're back to the hardwood, back to men's basketball after the end of the 2023-24 tumultuous season. West Virginia has a new page turned with the hiring of head coach Darian DeVries from Drake University, coming over the 23rd head coach in men's basketball program history. And the search really heated up, I would say, over the course of the last week. I think if you've been following my channel, I was calling it really back in January that this program was going to be turning a corner, moving on from Josh Eilert. Finally came to a realization a little over a week ago, and starting into a national search. So while other teams were into the thick of their conference tournaments last 2 weekends, and then into the NCAA national tournament this past week, athletics director Ren Baker was hot on the trail, looking to finalize who his man was going to be to lead this men's basketball program into its next chapter. It wasn't going to be Bob Huggins, and much to the chagrin of many WVU fans out there, I made peace with that back over this past summer, I felt like, or at the latest this past winter, that it wasn't going to be Bob Huggins, that West Virginia would be moving on, that the Bob Huggins era is over. It's going to be a new regime, and with Darian DeVries, I don't think you're going to have any sort of that hanging around of Bob Huggins around the facility at games, every single game. I know he's trying to get back into the game itself to try and find somewhere else, probably for the right fit at the right price somewhere, and then what school will take him. So I think I'll just start off this video within the first 2 minutes of just answering the question that's already been posed to me by some family and friends and co-workers and so on and so forth. How do you feel? So, long story short, to give you just a brief summary, and then I'll kind of break it all down for you. I'm feeling pretty good about this hire. I hope you are too. Let me know how you're feeling about this hire in the comments here on YouTube. Want to know good, bad, indifferent on the initial hire and what you see moving forward. But I'm still going to stick around the same long-term mantra of what I've been speaking to for the past several months of the way the 2023 football season unfolded. Is really my theme is to excel as best as humanly possible in men's basketball, and I think you can feel that from top down of leadership to the fan base still, and just the exuberance that you could see online over the last 48 hours about the hiring of Darian DeVries is that. And I got to ask this question as I talk into this. Is West Virginia a bigger basketball school than it is a football school? Are there more West Virginia basketball fans and supporters than there are than West Virginia football? The only reason I pitched this question is because of all of the different factoids that I've been talking about, for many months now, is that West Virginia was paying Bob Huggins like a top 10 coach in college basketball. The facility, elite. The commitment to NIL dollars was first to men's basketball over the course of the last 2 years before it was football, on level par, equal footing, until this past off season for football, passing up on men's basketball. I definitely feel like, but there is this commitment. And if you read some of the articles that were posted in the last month or so on On3 about what kind of job that the West Virginia job is, that was the number one theme, was the NIL resources, passionate fan base, good conference. We know all that. So that's what I want to say is, are you as excited about the prospects of the future of what the men's basketball program is as equal footing to the football program? Now, it's been some great eras, especially over the course of my lifetime. That there was the era of the Kevin Pittsnoggle, Mike Gansby, John Beilein era, ushering into the Bob Huggins era, kind of overlapping the same eras as it was for Rich Rodriguez, into Bill Stewart, into the early Dana Holgerson era, into Geno Smith, Tavon Austin, Stedman Bailey. I mean, that was a great window from 2004, 2005 into the early 2010s into the transition to the Big East. Then the men's basketball program really broke itself down to build itself back up into the Press Virginia teams of the mid 2010s with Javon Carter, Dexter Miles at the helm. And then for the last few years, it's really been since Derek Culver left the program, I think has been missing an identity. And whether everything that happened with Bob Huggins, we can talk about whether this year's program was going places or whether it's not. But it's like this is the fresh start for this program under Darian DeVries, I feel like, is what he's going to bring to the table, at least in the short term. And that's why I'm super excited in a way to see what he does immediately. How does he shape this roster is, and this is, I don't want to, how do I want to say this? Like, I'll pause on the long-term prospects for a second, and I'll put a pin in that and come back to it. But for the short term, at least, you're bringing over the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year over in Tucker DeVries, who is, by all counts and reports, an NBA prospect at 6'7", 210, 215 pounds. Like, he's going to walk in and be ready to take on a better league in the Big 12 Conference, to look to up his draft stock, look to show that he can play with the big boys nationally. So, like, that's the biggest thing. And then to bring in a couple others who I see on this list that have already hit the transfer portal within the last 24 hours. Kevin Overton, a all-conference Missouri Valley freshman freshman team player, 6'5", 180 pounds, originally from Oklahoma City. And then they got another guard who was the second leading scorer just behind DeVries at Ayton Wright from Hawthorne, California, 6'1", 185. So it's like, whoa, how the transfer portal can taketh and the transfer portal can giveth. And in this situation, not only are you getting a top, arguably right up there with Dusty May at Florida Atlantic, and then DeVries from Drake, and then Mark Byington from James Madison, you got one of the top three mid-major programs looking to take a step up into the Power Four league. So you got one of those who, by all accounts, hearing some of the comments from Greg McDermott at Creighton, hearing Jay Wright, who was on the CBS Sports broadcasts last night, talking about this hire, and the reports are glowing. And I'm very impressed how, I look at his age and it's like, okay, 48 years old, but my man almost has 30 years of coaching experience. I mean, he spent the last 6 seasons finally in his first gig as head coach. Let me take that back. It's closer to more like 25. He doesn't have his 30, he would have been starting coaching at 18. No, he played as a player collegiatity, and then, got into coaching really out of college. 17 years, 20 seasons, including 17 as an assistant coach at Creighton under Greg McDermott, learning how to coach. And then he finally gets his first gig at Drake, and he puts together in 6 seasons a 150-55 record. That's pretty impressive to go to the NCAA tournament the last 2 of 3 seasons, always having over 20 win seasons during his time. I know that Drake was a popular upset pick in this year's March Madness tournament. I mean, I did pick him. Didn't come through against Washington State there in the first round, second round, whatever we call it after the first floor. But, he's a guy who has, doing my math right here, 5-6 seasons at Drake, 17 as an assistant, 3 as a graduate, out of college. So, I mean, he's been spending his entire life in basketball, 48 years old. He's ready for his, first opportunity, and he's going to bring his son over, who's a conference player of the year, one of the top 10 scorers in college basketball this past season. So in the short-term fix, I like adding those guys, and maybe, because, I don't know if players, especially Gen Z, players of today, if they do care about like a new coach, but I would say, game wants to play with game. You want to play with the best players that you can. So if this kid can ball, he's one of the best scorers in the country. You have a scorer in Kirk Kriisa who has another year of eligibility, a playmaker in Noah Farrakhan who just oozes athleticism, and then you have a Pat Sumnick who just made maybe the best jump developmentally of any player on this team over the past course of this season. Those are three key components, I feel like, returners who you can build next year's team around. Now, the roster, as I've talked about, is going to be a revitalization. Who knows if Aiden Tagaloa Nelson, who came on from the football team this spring semester, is going to stick around and play basketball. But, Seth Wilson kind of took a step back this past year. Kobe Johnson took a moderate step forward in his development. But, those are guys who are going to be in their fourth year's worth of development, and have they already kind of reached their 3-star potential? We kind of know what they are, what they can give you. Josiah Harris, former 4-star player, who I really think his development has been, was stifled because of his first year, because he couldn't get an opportunity on the floor. Too many, upperclassmen, senior guys who were trying to make a run and trying to get into the NCAA tournament. So then this year, as I said, with a team that was more individuals rather than it was a team itself, I think that this could be an opportunity for Josiah Harris to finally get the coaching that he needs. And like, that's the thing, is he'll get the opportunity first because there's not so many big men. If you flood this team with guards, DeVries being kind of like a 3, stretch 4 perhaps, he's more of a 3, similarly to like Harris is. You got Jeremiah Brembry, who was the transfer from Florida State, who played okay in his opportunities this year. Farrakhan, another guard. If you bring in Aiton Wright, guard. If you bring in Kevin Overton, guard. Like, I know it's a game of scoring, that it's not always, or it's how many points you can put up at the end of the day. And we saw scoring boom this season in college basketball. So you got to put the ball in the basket, but you need some beef, you need some size. And West Virginia is really, this past year you had Jesse Edwards for a time, missing a chunk of the year of the season. He's gone. A Cook. He was just a 1-year rental player from Georgia. Or from Georgetown. He's gone. Quinn Zlazinski apparently would have to apply for a medical red shirt to get another year's worth of eligibility, but he might as well tell the NCAA, hey, I'm going to be hitting the transfer portal and going somewhere else. Can you please give me this medical red shirt? Because no way is the NCAA going to do any single favor for West Virginia men's basketball after what happened with Raekwon Battle this season in those lawsuits. So it's like West Virginia, first and foremost, is going to have to hit the portal hard. Either some of these Drake guys who want to come over, if maybe their top big man wants to come over, or can West Virginia go out there and still find some suitable fits in the transfer portal to come back or to come over to West Virginia, whether it's some of the players who transferred this past season who would want to come back. I don't know. I think that ship has sailed for some of those guys. I'm thinking like Mo Wagi out down at Alabama, or James Okonkwo at North Carolina. Now that Huggins really isn't there as the head coach, do they want to necessarily come back or try elsewhere or stay put? Otherwise, it's going to be go into the transfer portal, see which guys, who will come over from Drake, and try and fill out this roster. Because right now, it's still pretty skeleton-like. It's still pretty. There isn't that kind of quality depth that you can bring in there and can go toe-to-toe, night in and night out with the best in college basketball in the Big 12 Conference. So it'll be very interesting to see in the short term, but I like the prospects with DeVries there for this aspect, bringing over Tucker, than any of the other options in Dusty May from Florida Atlantic, or Mark Byam from James Madison. Although I think all three can coach and all three can be in the right fit. So now the long-term question mark is, that I want to know. I want to know the financial terms. I don't know if those have been necessarily reported just yet. Is he going to get money that's close to 3.75 million, which is what Dusty May got up at Michigan to pay DeVries into the top 15 of college coaches? Looking at this college coaches contracts list kind of amazes me. The numbers across the board. I think one would expect that really your top three was going to be the likes of John Calipari, one at $8.5 million, then a steeper drop off to two at Tom Izzo, $6.2 million at Michigan State, Bill Self nearly $6 million at Kansas. But then you get into into 10 through 20, 25. And you see some names on here that, honestly do kind of surprise me. Like Ed Cooley at Providence at $3.75 million. Jeff Capel at Pitt, what has he accomplished at $3.6 million? Andy Enfield, it seems like Florida Gulf Coast was throwing down alley-oops 20 years ago out at USC at $3.5 million. So is that where DeVries is going to be? Or did Baker sign, one heck of a deal and pay him $3 million or less? I don't know. I'll be very surprised. I want to see the terms before I, kind of give you my reactions on that. But like I said, if West Virginia is not going to pay Neil Brown like a top 40 coach in college football, we got to see NIL resources put into this program, helping out the assistants, of which Brown took a pay cut for this upcoming year. That if you're going to, again, invest in basketball, first and foremost, the investment has to be there for football, is where I will stand ultimately. Is that you can't spite one to fulfill another. And I don't think this is necessarily the case, but that's just what I wonder is, did West Virginia have to overspend to get DeVries and pay him along the lines of a Jamie Dixon at $3.5 million or a Matt Painter right around $3.6 million at Purdue? So I don't know. But yeah, longer term, just the bigger question mark is so past this one season that DeVries will be, have his son on the floor for this team to help out this roster and rebuild. But it's establishing some sort of a footprint, either regionally or nationally, in recruiting. And I know college basketball is a lot different than college football in recruiting. But if you go back to the golden era of the Big East, most recently, that North New York City pipeline with Deshaun Butler and Kevin Jones was just a-flowing with talent. And I know that West Virginia has, in this Big 12 conference, has trended west, so it's knocked out that New York City pipeline. Tried to kind of get that back in more recent years, but now it's been such an emphasis on the transfer portal, I feel like, over the last 2 to 3 seasons. So does West Virginia continue to want to be transfer U? I don't think so, because then you run into years like this where you bring in just one high school commit and you have a roster that's sitting at right around 10, 11 guys. So I think letting this brand play, just like football, letting this brand play nationally, but can DeVries and his staff be some of these talent evaluators, perhaps in the Midwest, where he's really cut his teeth from the state of Iowa, obviously, at Drake being in St. Louis, Missouri. There's a lot of competition there, for Big Ten teams as well. But I mean, if programs like Creighton, where he really cut his teeth as an assistant, and now at Drake, if these mid-major programs can go out there and start to see some success, or can see some success in the tournament, winning a game, there is a recipe for success. I think we all know that is establish your base, try and get as good a talent as you can out of the high school ranks, and supplement around them with transfer talent when you feel it's applicable, when you feel it's possible. But it's a very strange time as we know, and I like to talk about on my episodes, in both football and basketball nationally. It's very much in flux. There's an old guard of coaches that it seems like are being ushered out of the game. And I can't believe like the likes of a guy like Bill Self saying after Kansas leaves the NCAA tournament, I've been looking, for the end of this season for about a month or so now. So it's just hard. If guys like Bill Self, who are just notorious cheaters, who have never necessarily been caught to the point of facing any, if you don't have consequences, are you really caught? So if he's even complaining about the state of college basketball and really the me first generation that we have of player empowerment, whatever you want to call it, where these guys don't necessarily play for team. They don't play for the name across the chest anymore. They're playing for the name on their back, and they're being paid they play for how much they're being paid. That's what's going to be challenging, I feel like, to build a team in today's age, is one that has enough high-quality talent that is going to compete at the upper echelon of this conference against the likes of Kansas. Iowa State puts a lot into basketball. Houston is now an up-and-comer. Can you develop the roster? Can you develop the program while not having to fight so much for NIL dollars in competition with player for player? I mean, that's the golden ticket that programs are trying to establish, is can you get enough buy-in by your players that even if they're passing on NIL opportunities from other schools to make comparable money, but can they go here, find a home that they feel comfortable in by a coaching staff that's going to develop them, either to get them to the NBA or as good of a college basketball player as possible, and then are you able to keep up in NIL dollars to be able to pay them, or are they going to feel comfortable that perhaps they take a pay cut to stay? Like that's what's just so hard. So finding the right fits is going to be ever important, and I think it takes guys who are willing to work long hours. I think longer than ever before in the type of cultivation of the right fit player, from a talent perspective, from an attitude perspective. Like, that's why I think these coaches are complaining so much about the work-life balance and the work-life workload. Is you can't, like a Joe Paterno of today, not know your players' first names anymore, and just expect on the figurehead alone coming to your program. And I get it, football versus basketball a little bit different, but it's I think you got to know, in basketball does that. You're recruiting guys as young as 7th, 8th grade on the AAU circuit, and then you're establishing this relationship that spans multiple years, multiple recruiting cycles. I mean, think of the money that West Virginia basketball, before Huggins was fired, invested in Alir Malik. He's a 4 or 5 star recruit from the Pittsburgh area here. I think he ultimately committed and maybe signed with Florida State. Checking on that in this past fall. But I mean, for the last 2 years, West Virginia was on him, hotter than anybody. And he wanted to play for Bob Huggins, wanted to come to West Virginia, in the investment and time and getting to know him, that's what it takes. So I think that's what's for Coach DeVries is he obviously has the coaching acumen, has the development. If these guys in this first year can have the kind of rebound year that we're not talking about the worst year in program history. If you can make strides, if this Tucker DeVries can be the kind of player that he was in the Missouri Valley Conference, that's one who's trying to contend for an all Big 12 conference team, first team, maybe even second team, and then add some pieces around him, then we might be talking about a better year one for Darian DeVries. then we were talking about if even say a Bob Huggins came back for this next year, because either way, there was so much of an investment that was put into this year from an NIL perspective, from a roster perspective, like that this was your shot. This was your opportunity to go and get there, and now it's like a team that goes all in the baseball playoffs or hockey playoffs, who gets a bunch of rentals at the trade deadline. They go all in, and then the next year they're like, okay, well, how do we put this team together? What kind of payroll are we going to have? Like that's what I'm expecting for West Virginia. So maybe that this DeVries hire can soften the blow. Because that's the thing. Like, as much as we love to talk about the accomplishments and successes, at least from like a PR standpoint and a marketing standpoint and positive momentum, good juju for a program, nothing does it quite like a coaching hire. So this is where you can really wipe the slate clean. And that's why I think it's so hard when people ask me the question, how do you grade this hire? What do you think? Why I can feel good and feel vibes. I can tell you all the positives, but we have to acknowledge the negatives. Is that, and like, keep staying with my theme of talking about football, is right now, Brown's just about a C minus, I'll say just below average hire. When you look at his overall record, body of work over the course of 5 seasons, if you were giving him a C or C plus, I would say, but that's the beautiful thing, is you can either look at it in totality, like some conspiracy Morgantown athletes love to do all the time when talking about Neil Brown's record, or can you look at it in a 1-year, revisionist history and looking forward, and with seeing the prospects of the momentum of what can be, or if you look back. So right now, I think it's going to be a tough first year for Darian DeVries to establish his culture with the majority of the roster to what will be retained. I think it's really important from a recruiting and retention aspect for DeVries to get in here, or what research has he already done preliminarily on some of these guys. I doubt much, considering the fact that he was just coaching Drake 5 days ago. So he's gonna have to get in here, gonna have to get used to the culture. And then I think it's, day one and through the course of the next really, 4 to 5 months is evaluate this roster. Are there guys who, don't want to be here, don't want to buy into, establish this culture, establish what you're all about. What are you going to do from a strength and conditioning type of aspect? Are you going to do some sort of summer trip? Who wants to be here? Who doesn't want to be here? And NIL is going to play into that, no doubt, already looking ahead for next year. And then, what do you have coming in, and what's the transfer portal going to look like, and where do you want to add pieces? Not only from Drake, who I think some of these players can fill some of these holes in the short term, but also nationally to try, and what can you do from an NIL perspective and to recruit these kind of guys coming in. So then year one, coaching. Year one, making these connections here in this region, whether it's, like I said, Pittsburgh's not a very strong area for high school talent. State of Ohio, here and there in some pockets at different, places across the state. State of West Virginia, not so much. Into Maryland, not so much. Again, New York City was West Virginia's mecca. That's where you went to the pipeline. That's where you went to the well for talent. So does DeVries have any sort of connections to get back in there? Does he want to recruit that area? Does he want West Virginia to recruit the Midwest? That's what I kind of want to know, is what's his long-term strategy from a high school recruiting standpoint, and how does that play in with NIL? And is the NIL budget smaller? Is it shortened because you don't have this larger-than-life figure, this Bob Huggins at the helm of the program? And can DeVries inspire the kind of confidence out of Mountaineer Nation to want to support Country Roads Trust? And then what all the heck happens with college athletics and employment status for players. So it's a crazy time. I'm happy that DeVries chose West Virginia. I think he wanted to get into the Power Four. Another reason is what's going to happen to the mid-major schools with access to the NCAA tournament. If you hear some of the language that's come out from some of the conference commissioners like Greg Sankey or some of the other guys on TV over this last week, and then again, the stretching of resources where it's exacerbated into the Big Ten and SEC from a financial standpoint, and then you're really looking at the other two that are right now territorially fighting between the ACC and the Big 12 for really third place. So I think that DeVries wanted to get himself into one of these teams, one of these programs that has perennially performed and invested in its men's basketball program like one of the top 40 schools around the country. So I think it could be a good fit, could be a match made in almost heaven, and the prospects look up. So I'm happy with this hire. I don't think necessarily, like that's the other part of the argument here, not to get too long in the tooth, but it's like if you're a guy like Coach Calipari, and I know Kentucky fans got to be so heated right now, have to be just like checking. I haven't looked really necessarily at Kentucky's social media over the course of the last 5 days, but for what hasn't he accomplished over the course of the last decade or so, being one of the top 3, if not number 1, highest paid coaches for much of that tenure, really with how much that Kentucky has invested in its players and sending players to the NBA, that I don't think there was any sort of a prospect of a guy like Coach Cal, if he got fired at Kentucky, to take the West Virginia job. And then that's the other question. So do you want damaged goods? As much as and I still do love Bob Huggins, he's damaged goods, mainly because of what's happened off the court, but also, just what's happened, in the last couple of years. He's never evolved his offenses. Still can coach defense, obviously can and nationally recruit, but it just hasn't led to tangible success. I mean, if you think about it, West Virginia had one NCAA tournament win, then lost to Syracuse within the last 5 seasons, and then lost to Maryland last year in the first round game. So you weren't getting those results out of Huggins. What would a guy like Coach Calipari give you? And does he want to do that? Does he want to rebuild this roster? Could he rebuild this roster? Obviously there's got to be the NIL support, so he's got to get paid. There's a lot of investment that comes with hiring a coach like Coach Cal. And then some of these other coaches that I look across through the top 5, is the ROI there on a guy like Chris Holtmann, who just got fired at Ohio State? Do you want him? If for some reason, Matt Painter got fired at Purdue, which I doubt, say they didn't win over this past weekend in the NCAA tournament, do you want a guy like him? Or do you want to buy perhaps low on one of these up-and-comers? That's to compare it again to football, which I like to do, is do you want to bet on the head coach at the G5 level? Do you want to bet on the assistant coach at a Power 5 program? If you're going to bring over a coach from a Power 5 program, are you moving laterally? If you're moving laterally, you got to pay them more. And if you're moving up, is what programs in the Power 5 is West Virginia ahead of? And you can, I guess, equate this to basketball on that same kind of level. Is West Virginia... I was thinking about this right before I hit the record button. If Kelvin Sampson left Houston today, would he take the West Virginia job? If he wasn't employed by Houston and what he's being paid, if West Virginia offered him comparable money, would he take the West Virginia job over staying at Houston? I don't know. That's a great question. Scott Drews just won a national title at Baylor. If West Virginia was going to pay him more money, would he come to West Virginia? Let's look at another one out there. No, Jamie Dixon would never come here. Nate Oates at Alabama, great coach. I think can really, they got a tough next matchup, next round. But Nate Oates, a great performer down at Alabama. If West Virginia paid him more money, would he want to come to West Virginia? Does he think he can excel like he can or better at West Virginia than he can at Alabama? That's the question that we fans always ask ourselves and that we're guarded about. That we're very sensitive to that topic, myself included. You never want to be criticized for some of these things that are necessarily outside of your control as a fan. You can only spend as much money you have, watch as many games as you can on TV or mobile device to help out their ratings. There are only so much that you as one fan can do to impact a program. So this is why I always talk about the investments that the programs make into themselves. And right now, I'm very curious to see what Ren Baker was able to contractually work out with DeVries, and then kind of what the expectations are for in the short term and the long term as the college athletics landscape works itself out. So thanks for tuning in for this video. Love to hear your thoughts. Did I say anything stupid? Did I say some things that made some sense? I hope you enjoyed it. Love to get your thoughts on the prospects of the program, as I said kind of at the onset of this video. If you liked it, hit that like button so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. So, hail West Virginia, let's go.